On a quiet morning at the edge of a desolate forest, Matilda suddenly noticed a staggering figure appear on her porch. It was a wild bobcat named Daisy, her body gaunt, one leg severely injured, and her untamed eyes filled with a desperation rarely seen. Instead of running away as wild instinct would dictate, Daisy turned back to look at Matilda, then slowly led her deeper into the dark forest. But what could make a wild animal place complete trust in a human? And why was Daisy willing to return to the terrifying nightmare she had just escaped? What Matilda discovered after following her exposed a cruel truth and gave rise to a story that has touched the hearts of millions. Before we step into this journey filled with tears, courage, and sacred maternal love, please remember to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any more touching stories like this one. The cries of desperation were not heard but felt. A shadow, thin and desperate, watched the chaos unfold. Matilda's trembling hands clutched the phone, her voice barely a whisper as she described the horrifying scene. "Yes, officer. The warehouse on Elm Street. There are so many of them, animals neglected." Police lights flashed, cutting through the encroaching dusk, painting the dilapidated structure in urgent streaks of red and blue. The air, heavy with the stench of fear and decay, prickled her nostrils. Inside, a hidden world of animal cruelty was being exposed, with cages stacked haphazardly, each one a testament to profound neglect. Emaciated, terrified creatures, dogs, cats, even a few bewildered chickens whimpered and shivered, their eyes wide with a silent, primal fear. Among them, in a cramped wire cage tucked behind a rusted drum, a tiny bobcat, Daisy, lay motionless. Her rough, spotted fur was clotted with grime, and her small, fragile body barely registered the tremors of fear that coursed through her brethren. The sound of heavy boots echoed, growing closer. Daisy's tiny heart, already a frantic drum, throbbed against her ribs. She couldn't move. Her limbs felt like dead weight, her muscles seized with an unfamiliar, profound exhaustion. Days, or perhaps weeks, had blurred into an endless cycle of thirst and gnawing hunger. The humans, these giants with their booming voices and clanking equipment, were a terrifying blur. They moved with a purpose she couldn't comprehend, their shadows looming large and menacing. One pair of enormous hands encased in thick blue gloves reached for her cage. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through her stupor. She tried to recoil to flatten herself further into the rusty wire, but her body betrayed her. A whimper so small it was almost inaudible escaped her throat. The hand, surprisingly gentle despite their size, unlatched the door. A different pair of hands, this time belonging to a woman with kind, worried eyes. Matilda reached in. Daisy flinched, a jolt of instinctual fear overriding her weakness. This giant smelled different, less like the sharp metallic scent of the others, more like old wood and faint lavender. A soft blanket, smelling of clean warmth, was gently draped over her, enveloping her in a cocoon. The sudden warmth was startling, a sensation she hadn't felt in what felt like forever. It wasn't just a physical warmth. It was a strange, unfamiliar comfort that began to thaw the ice around her heart. She could still hear the distant clamor, the cries of other animals being moved. But here, inside this soft darkness, it was quieter. The gentle vibration of movement began, a slow sway that rocked her. She was being carried. The world outside the blanket was a blur of motion and strange sounds. The rumble of a vehicle, the rush of wind, then silence. More gentle hands, more soft blankets. A new smell filled the air, clean, sterile, mixed with a faint, sweet scent she couldn't place. She was placed on a cold, smooth surface. A giant face peering down at her was adorned with spectacles that magnified its eyes. Fear returned, a fresh wave, as a needle glinted under bright, focused lights. A sharp sting, then a wave of drowsiness. Her limbs, which had been so heavy, now felt strangely light, floating. She fought against the encroaching darkness, but it was too strong, too comforting. When she awoke, the world was softer, quieter. The sharp hunger in her belly was still there, but muted. The pain in her body, a constant dull ache, had receded to a background hum. She was in a small enclosure, the air smelling of wood shavings and something else, something gentle and natural. The enclosure had a soft bed, piled high with blankets. She pushed her nose into one, inhaling the clean, comforting scent. A low rumble in her stomach reminded her of her thirst. A small, shallow bowl of water, clear and cool, sat within reach. Tentatively, she lapped at it. The taste was pure, invigorating, unlike the murky, stagnant water she'd known. It was the purest water she had ever tasted. Her small tongue, rough with dehydration, worked furiously, quenching a thirst that felt centuries old. She drank until her belly was full, a strange, pleasant fullness. A giant, the one with the kind eyes, watched her from a distance. This giant was no longer scary. There was a quiet understanding in her gaze. Daisy the bobcat, near death, had been given a second chance, her small life now a beacon of hope in the quiet promise of rehabilitation and trust. What fate awaited her, she didn't know, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel entirely alone. Just hours before, a familiar yet unsettling presence had appeared on Matilda's porch. It felt like a dream, the kind that lingers with a faint tremor long after you've woken. But this was real. That morning, the air still held the crisp chill of pre-dawn. Matilda, a woman in her 60s with a heart as vast as the wilderness surrounding her remote cabin, was enjoying her routine coffee. The silence, usually a balm to her soul, felt different today. A whisper of something unseen, unheard, hung in the air. She sat on her worn porch swing, the wood groaning a familiar protest, the steam from her mug curling into the cool air. Her gaze, accustomed to scanning the forest edges for deer or a wandering bear, was unfocused, content. Then a fleeting shadow, a flash of tawny fur, caught her eye. It was Daisy, Daisy the bobcat. Matilda had seen her before, often a graceful blur disappearing into the undergrowth, a ghost of the forest. But this time, Daisy was different. The sleek, powerful form Matilda remembered was replaced by a gaunt, hesitant figure. Daisy's tawny fur, usually pristine, was dull and matted in places, clinging to a frame that looked too fragile for such a wild creature. And she was limping, favoring her back leg with every painful, deliberate step. The bobcat stopped at the edge of the clearing, her wild amber eyes fixed on Matilda. No snarl, no hiss, just a series of soft, urgent chirps, a sound Matilda had never associated with a creature of Daisy's ferocity. It was a plea, undeniable and heartbreaking. Daisy let out another soft sound, a desperate mewl that seemed to carry the weight of days or weeks of suffering, before turning and limping slowly, painfully, toward the thick woods. Matilda's initial apprehension, a lifetime's ingrained respect for wild animals and their boundaries, warred with something deeper. An undeniable pull, a silent invitation tugged at her to follow. The world for Daisy the bobcat had narrowed to a kaleidoscope of pain and fear. The last few sunrises had brought only more hunger, more burning agony in her leg. Each step was a decision, a choice between moving and the fire that shot through her nerves. The big, slow-moving creature on the porch, the one with the strange, warm smell, had been a last, desperate gamble. Daisy had offered the softest, most vulnerable parts of herself, sounds usually reserved for her own kits, a silent begging, and it had worked. The next thing Daisy knew, the world had become a confusing series of smells and sensations. There was the familiar scent of the big creature, but also new, sharp, metallic smells. Then a sudden jarring clang, and she was trapped. Terror seized her, a primal urge to fight, to claw, to bite. But her leg throbbed, a relentless drumbeat of pain, draining her strength. The large creature, the giant, spoke in low, rumbling tones. Too soft to be a threat, yet too strange to be comforting. Daisy tried to shrink, to disappear, but there was nowhere to go. Then came the sting, a sudden, sharp prick in her shoulder, followed by a wave of something warm and heavy, dragging her down into a deep, dark pool. When she awoke, the world was a blur. The fear still a knot in her gut, but the relentless pain in her leg had dulled. The giants were there again, their movements slow and deliberate. A cool, wet sensation on her tongue water. Clean water after days of parched thirst tasted like a miracle. A warmth spread through her, not just from the liquid, but from something soft beneath her, a gentle pressure against her aching body. The giants, no longer so terrifying, became sources of quiet sounds and careful movements, their hands surprisingly gentle as they tended to her. The harshness of the recent past, the gnawing hunger, the constant ache slowly began to recede, replaced by a strange, new sensation: relief. Against her better judgment, Matilda followed the injured Bobcat deeper into the dense, silent forest. Every rational cell in her 60-year-old body screamed for her to turn back, to call animal control, to let professionals handle a wild, potentially dangerous animal. But the Bobcat's desperate gaze, even in its fear, had latched onto something deep within Matilda, an old ache, a forgotten promise. Common sense battled an overwhelming sense of duty, a primal call to help a creature in distress. The forest, usually a source of peace, now felt like a living entity, pulling her further into its shadowy embrace, its silence amplifying the thumping of her own heart. With a deep, shaky breath, she grabbed her emergency kit, her old hands fumbling with the buckles, and stepped over the fallen log, committing herself to Daisy's faltering trail. Daisy, her right hind leg throbbing with a dull, insistent ache, pushed forward. Each step sent a jolt of pain through her small frame, but something stronger than the pain propelled her. An instinct, sharp and unyielding, whispered that this human, this slow, deliberate giant, was different. Not a hunter, not a threat. A strange, unfamiliar scent of lavender and something sweet followed the human, mingling with the earthy smell of damp leaves and pine needles. The forest grew thicker. The path Daisy had chosen, barely a deer trail, now almost entirely consumed by undergrowth. Doubt gnawed at Matilda, a cold dread seeping into her bones. What if she got lost? What if Daisy turned on her? For Daisy, every rustle in the leaves, every snap of a twig that wasn't her own, was a reminder of the danger she was leading them towards. The scent of unseen predators, faint but ever present, prickled her whiskers. Her ears swiveled, acutely attuned to the subtle shifts in the forest breath. But the giant continued to follow, slowly, patiently, always just out of reach. A constant, comforting presence, despite the initial fear Daisy felt. The rhythmic crunch of Matilda's boots on the leaf litter became a strange lullaby, a counterpoint to the wild symphony of the woods. A sharp, sudden pain lanced through Daisy's leg, causing her to stumble, a choked whimper escaping her throat. She collapsed, her small body trembling, the energy that had propelled her thus far finally giving way. She flattened herself against the cool earth, trying to disappear into the dappled light and shadow, her breathing shallow and ragged. The giant stopped, the rhythmic crunching ceasing. A moment of intense self-doubt washed over Matilda. She was too old for this, too frail. She wasn't equipped. This was folly. But then she saw Daisy, a small, vulnerable bundle of fur, panting, eyes wide with pain and a lingering plea. Compassion, fierce and overwhelming, surged through her, solidifying her commitment to Daisy and her unknown plight. She wouldn't leave her, not now, not ever. Matilda slowly, carefully knelt down. Daisy's ears flattened against her head, a low growl rumbling in her chest. A last-ditch effort to ward off the perceived threat. But the giant didn't move closer, didn't make any sudden gestures. Instead, a soft voice, surprisingly gentle, murmured words Daisy couldn't understand, but it felt in the slow cadence, the calming tone. A small, unfamiliar object was gently placed on the ground a few feet away, a bowl, smelling faintly of clean water. The thirst, a parched desert in her throat, warred with her instinct to flee. Hesitantly, Daisy pushed herself up, her injured leg protesting with a sharp twinge. She took a single faltering step toward the bowl, then another. The water, cool and clear, shimmered invitingly. Her tongue, rough and dry, lapped at the surface. It was the purest, most wonderful taste she had known in days, a cool balm for her aching body. She drank deeply, her gaze occasionally darting to the giant, who remained still, a statue of quiet patience. The fear, though still present, was slowly being replaced by a burgeoning, fragile sense of relief. This giant, this Matilda, wasn't so scary after all. And for the first time in a long time, Daisy felt a spark of hope, a nascent trust beginning to bloom in the wilderness of her heart. The crisp forest air, usually a symphony of rustling leaves and distant bird calls, felt different now, tainted with the acrid scent of human fear and her own desperate resolve. What secrets did the shadows hold, and what drove Daisy to such desperate measures, nudging the giant human Matilda deeper into the tangled undergrowth? The metallic tang of the cages still haunted her senses, mingling with the harsh whispers of her captors, a memory that made her hackles rise despite the calming presence of the older woman beside her. Leading Matilda back to that place was terrifying, yet she had to try. There was no other way. Her left front paw throbbed with every step, a dull, insistent ache that was a constant, searing reminder of her escape. The bone beneath the skin felt hot and swollen, a sharp pain when she put weight on it. She'd gnawed and clawed with a frenzy she hadn't known she possessed, her teeth ripping at a weakened section of the wire mesh. The taste of metal and her own blood, metallic and sharp. She remembered the sheer, overwhelming terror of leaving her kin behind, especially her tiny, sickly cub, tucked into the far corner of their shared cage, its breath shallow, its cries weak. That thought, that crushing, soul-deep agony, had nearly broken her, had almost made her give up. This human, Matilda, with her soft scent and even softer voice, was her last, impossible chance to save them. Daisy lowered her head, sniffing at a faint, unnatural scent on the ground. Old oil, something metallic, a human smell that was too sharp, too cold. It was the scent of them. A shiver ran through her sleek body, from the tips of her pointed ears to the bob of her short tail. Her whiskers twitched, picking up the subtle currents of the air, trying to filter out the fear, to focus on the task. The forest, usually a safe haven, now felt like a dangerous corridor, leading her back to the very nightmare she had just escaped. Every snapped twig, every rustle in the undergrowth, made her ears swivel, her body tense, ready to bolt. But she couldn't bolt. Not now. Not when her cub, her very own flesh and blood, depended on her. Matilda, bless her human slowness, was trying to keep up, her heavy boots thudding softly behind Daisy. The Bobcat glanced back, her sharp gaze meeting the woman's kind, worried eyes. Daisy nudged Matilda's leg with her head, a silent plea for urgency. Matilda understood, slowing her pace but maintaining her determined forward momentum. The human scent of her, warm and reassuring, was a strange comfort amidst the growing chill of fear. Daisy remembered the moment of her capture with sickening clarity. A flash of light, a loud bang, and then a strange, dizzying darkness. When she awoke, she was in the cage, the metallic bars pressing against her fur, the air thick with the scent of fear and confinement. They were huge, these humans, their voices guttural and harsh, their movements clumsy and frightening. She'd fought, oh, how she'd fought, but the net had been too strong, the hands too many. The worst part hadn't been her own capture, not really. It was the realization, the cold dread that settled in her belly, that she wasn't alone. Other animals, their cries muffled, their fear palpable, were also trapped. And then she saw her cub, so small, so vulnerable, huddled in the corner, its tiny body shivering, its breathing ragged. A wave of primal protectiveness had surged through Daisy, sharpening her teeth, strengthening her resolve. She had to escape. She had to go back for them. The taste of the wire, the agony of her paw tearing, the burning in her muscles as she pushed through the narrow gap, it was all a blur. All that mattered was the thought of her cub, its small, weak body, its clouded eyes. Leaving it behind felt like tearing a piece of her own soul away. Now the scent grew stronger, the metallic tang more pronounced, mixed with the stale, oily smell of old machinery, and something else, a faint, sweetish odor that made Daisy's hackles rise even further. The warehouse. It was close. Her paw throbbed relentlessly, a dull, constant reminder of the price of freedom, the cost of hope. Her muscles ached. Every fiber of her being screamed to turn and run, to disappear into the comforting depths of the wilderness. But the image of her cub, its tiny, helpless form, spurred her onward. This human, Matilda, was her only hope. Daisy nudged the woman's hand, then her side, a low rumble vibrating in her chest. Not a growl, but a desperate, guttural plea. Matilda slowed, then stopped, her gaze sweeping the dense thicket ahead. Daisy pushed past her, moving into the last line of trees, peering through the leaves. There it was, a low corrugated metal building, almost swallowed by the overgrown weeds, its single high window opaque with grime. The air around it felt heavy, laden with the silent cries of the trapped. Daisy let out a soft, urgent chuff, her eyes fixed on the building, then turned back to Matilda, her gaze intense, pleading, "Save them, please!" Them. The wind, a cold, insistent hand, pushed against Matilda's back, urging her forward, yet her feet remained rooted to the crumbling earth. Before them, a relic of a bygone era, stood the trestle bridge. It was a skeletal beast of ancient wood, its planks weathered to a silvery gray, precariously spanning a ravine that plunged into shadow, the bottom invisible. A dilapidated swaying bridge stood between them and the truth, a perilous test of trust. Each groan of the tortured timber seemed to echo her own trepidation, a physical manifestation of the fear that coiled in her gut. She'd always hated heights, a vertigo-inducing dread that tightened her chest and made her vision swim. This wasn't just a fear. It was a gaping maw, promising to swallow her whole. Daisy, the bobcat, felt the hesitation in the giant. The giant, Matilda, was a source of warmth and softness now, a dispenser of soft-tasting food and gentle pats. But this new place, with its wide-open emptiness below and the sharp, whipping air, brought a shiver of the old fear. The world had been a place of hard edges and sudden hunger, of hiding and running. Now the giant's calm presence was a familiar comfort, a steady anchor. Daisy twitched her short tail, her muscles tensing. She looked back at Matilda, her amber eyes now clear and bright, reflecting a silent plea. This was a path, and paths were meant to be followed. There was a faint scent, new and intriguing, carried on the wind from the other side, a promise of something. A subtle shift in the giant's scent, a sharper tang of worry, an unfamiliar tremor. Daisy nudged Matilda's leg with her head, a silent encouragement, before carefully, deliberately, stepping onto the first unstable plank. The wood creaked, a low groan, and a tremor ran through the bridge. The world shifted beneath Daisy's paws. The planks weren't solid ground. They moved. They groaned. Her instincts screamed danger, a primal warning to retreat. But the giant was behind her, and the giant had become a safe place. The smell of the unknown pulled her forward. Each step was a measured calculation, her claws retracting and extending, or seeking purchase on the uneven wood. The wind pressed against her fur, ruffling it, making her feel small and exposed. Her ears swiveled, catching the mournful cries of the bridge, the whistling of the wind through the gaps. The memory of hunger, of being alone and vulnerable, pricked at her. This felt different, though. This was a shared vulnerability, a strange, unspoken agreement with the giant behind her. The giant's footfalls were heavy, the thudding sound regular, a rhythm she could follow. Matilda took a breath, a ragged gasp, and pushed the vertigo down, deep into the pit of her stomach. Daisy was out there, on those rickety boards. How could she, the protector, abandon her now? Her love for the bobcat, this wild creature who had slowly, painstakingly come to trust her, was a force stronger than any fear. Each plank groaned, a protest under her weight, the bridge swaying beneath her feet like a ship on a rough sea. She focused on Daisy, a small, resolute beacon moving steadily ahead. The wood felt rough, splintered under her boots. The air was thin, cold, biting at her exposed skin. She could feel the vibration of the wind, the tremor of the structure deep in her bones. Each creak of wood, each gust of wind was a chilling reminder of the fragility of their mission, of their lives. Daisy felt the tremor from the giant steps behind her, a reassurance, a presence. The bridge itself was a monster, creaking and swaying, but the giant was a familiar warmth. The wind, though, was a cruel, unseen hand, trying to push her off. She flattened herself slightly, her sleek body low to the ground, her senses hyper-alert. The strange new smells from the other side were stronger now: earth, pine, and something wilder, something free. A distant bird call, a sound she remembered from before the hunger, before the fear, before the giants became her world. The bridge swayed again, a sharper jolt this time, and a small, loose piece of wood broke free and tumbled into the abyss. Daisy's ears flattened, a low growl rumbling in her chest, a primal warning. But she kept moving. The giant was still there, a steady, heavy presence. Matilda's breath hitched, her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat. She focused on Daisy, her graceful, steady movements a stark contrast to Matilda's own clumsy terror. This creature, who had known such cruelty, such abandonment, was now leading the way, a testament to her inherent strength and resilience. The bobcat's fur, once matted and dull, now shone with a healthy sheen, a testament to the care she'd received. Matilda reached out a hand, not to touch Daisy, but to grip the splintered railing, grounding herself. She could feel the vibrations of the entire structure. The very air seemed to hum with tension. This wasn't just a physical journey, it was a testament to the bond they had forged, a bond that transcended species, fear, and even the laws of nature. Finally, the planks became steadier. The ground beneath Daisy's paws felt solid again, firm earth giving way to soft pine needles. She turned, her head cocked, looking back at the giant. Matilda was still on the monstrous swaying thing, her movements slow, cautious. A low rumble escaped Daisy's throat, a questioning sound. The giant had come with her. The giant had followed. A wave of relief, primal and deep, washed over Daisy. The smells here were potent, inviting. This was a new world, a potential new home, and the giant had brought her to it, despite the terrifying, wobbling path. The trust was complete, sealed by the shared peril of the bridge. The silence inside was more chilling than any scream. Matilda's flashlight revealed a nightmare. Daisy the bobcat, a phantom of rust-colored fur and wild instinct, led Matilda down a forgotten, overgrown path. Each snap of a twig under Matilda's sensible boots, each rustle of dead leaves was amplified in the oppressive quiet. Daisy moved with an almost unsettling grace, her tail twitching in agitation, a silent beacon in the fading twilight. The path, barely discernible, ended abruptly at a derelict warehouse, a skeletal structure of corrugated metal and broken windows, swallowed by weeds and shadows. The air grew heavy here, thick with a sickening, acrid smell that snagged at Matilda's throat, a chemical tang mingled with something organic and deeply, disturbingly wrong. Matilda's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She paused, the beam of her flashlight trembling slightly in her hand, before pushing open a rusty, graffiti-scarred door. It groaned in protest, a sound like a dying animal, revealing a maw of blackness. As she stepped inside, a wave of revulsion, cold and visceral, washed over her, making her stomach clench. The air inside was stifling, putrid. In the eerie half-light filtering through grimy windows and the wavering beam of her flashlight, she saw them. Rows of cages, stacked high, disappeared into the gloom. Her flashlight cut through the dust motes, dancing in the stale air, illuminating faces that twisted her gut. Exotic animals, their forms indistinct in the shadows, were crammed into enclosures far too small. The despair in their eyes, the hollowed-out look of neglect, was undeniable. She saw the glint of an ape's intelligent, broken gaze, the nervous pacing of a large, striped cat too thin for its frame, the dull sheen on a reptile's scales where they should have shimmered. The sickening smell intensified, a cocktail of fear, waste, and something else, something metallic and menacing. Matilda, her breath catching in her throat, felt a cold dread seep into her bones. This wasn't just neglect. This was systematic cruelty, a cold, calculated operation. Her gaze swept frantically across the cages, searching, her mind still grappling with the sheer scale of the horror. Then she saw it, an empty cage, larger than the others, its wire mesh bent and chewed through at one corner. A single, distinctively familiar tuft of reddish-brown fur, caught on a jagged wire, pulsed with silent accusation. Daisy's prison. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow, knocking the air from her lungs. Daisy, this was where she had been, this hellhole. Her earlier terror, her flight, her refusal to be touched, it all snapped into sharp, horrifying focus. Daisy wasn't just wild. She was a survivor, an escape from this nightmare, desperately seeking refuge, seeking safety. And now, driven by some primal instinct, some desperate plea for help, she had brought Matilda back to the source of her trauma. It was a silent testament to a trust Daisy was only just beginning to place in the elderly woman, a fragile thread woven from shared moments in gentle hands. Matilda's heart pounded, a drumbeat of impotent rage and surging purpose. She was no longer just a kind-hearted woman offering shelter. She was a witness. This wasn't about a single Bobcat anymore, but an entire network of suffering. The weight of it settled on her shoulders, heavy and undeniable. She had stumbled into the heart of a crisis, and turning away was no longer an option. She had to act. For Daisy, for all of them. The instinct to rescue, to heal, now burned with a fierce, unyielding flame within her. Amidst the despair, a tiny flicker of hope, barely clinging to life, lay in a forgotten corner. Matilda's eyes scanned the rows of cages, each one a fresh stab to her already aching heart. The air hung heavy with the scent of fear and neglect, stale straw, ammonia, and something else. Something metallic and sad. Every whimper, every pair of wide, frightened eyes chipped away at her resolve, replacing it with a rising tide of despair. She moved slowly, her sensible shoes crunching softly on the concrete floor, a litany of silent apologies forming on her lips for every creature she couldn't reach, couldn't save. Then a sound, soft and almost imperceptible, pulled her up short, a tiny, reedy whimper, easily lost in the cacophony of the shelter, but distinct enough to snag her attention. It came from a dark corner, a shadowy alcove behind a stack of empty crates. Matilda's heart pounded, a frantic drum against her ribs. She knelt, her knees protesting, and peered into the gloom. Hidden beneath a pile of old dirty rags, barely distinguishable from the shadows themselves, was Daisy's cub. Daisy. The thought of the mother, somewhere out there, likely searching for this very life, made the lump in Matilda's throat grow. The cub was small, impossibly small, a tiny bundle of matted fur and sharp angles. It lay unnaturally still, only the shallow, ragged breaths lifting its minuscule chest, a testament to its continued existence. Each breath was a struggle, a gasp, a painful whisper against the silence of the corner. The cub's world was a hazy blur of pain and cold, a vast, shadowy cave that smelled of fear and something sharp, something that made its nose tingle. Its small body ached, every bone a protest against the hard ground. Thirst was a burning claw in its throat, and hunger a hollow ache that gnawed relentlessly. The giants moved around, their booming voices and heavy footsteps vibrations that shook its fragile world. It tried to hide, to become invisible, but even that effort was too much. A shiver racked its frame, not just from the cold, but from a deeper, primal fear. Where was warmth? Where was the soft comfort of its mother's belly? The memory was a faint whisper, almost lost to the overwhelming present. A jolt of pure panic shot through Matilda. This wasn't just about rescue, it was about saving a life. Right now, in this instant. The cub was dying. There was no doubt in her mind. Its tiny body was too still, its breathing too shallow. Its eyes, when they fluttered open for a fraction of a second, held a glazed, unfocused quality that screamed for immediate intervention. Her hands, usually so steady, trembled violently as she fumbled for her phone. Her fingers, stiff with age and urgency, punched 911. The dial tone, usually an innocuous sound, now seemed impossibly loud, a jarring alarm in the quiet desperation. "Yes, hello," she choked out, her voice raw, laced with urgency and a desperation she hadn't known she possessed. I'm at the old abandoned kennel on Elm Street. I found a bobcat cub, and it's barely alive. I need help now." Her words tumbled out, a frantic, barely coherent plea. The operator's calm voice, a stark contrast to her own internal chaos, slowly brought a semblance of order to her thoughts. The giant's voice was a low rumble, but there was a new tone to it, a high-pitched urgency that was different from the previous, slower movements. The cub's ears, flat against its head, picked up the new vibrations, a different energy in the air. A large, warm hand, smelling faintly of something sweet and clean, carefully moved the rags away. Light, harsh and sudden, flooded its hiding spot, making its sensitive eyes water. It tried to shrink further, to disappear, but the hand was gentle, not forceful. A different, sharper pain zinged through its leg, and it let out a weak moan. A giant kneeled, and for the first time, it saw the giant's face, blurry and enormous, but with lines around the eyes that seemed soft. The ambulance siren wailed in the distance, growing louder, closer. Matilda had never been so grateful for the sound of approaching emergency services. She gently scooped up the cub, its minuscule weight almost non-existent in her trembling hands. It felt fragile, like spun glass, and she cradled it against her chest, offering what little warmth she could. The cub stirred weakly, a tiny, almost imperceptible twitch. "Hold on, little one," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Help is coming. You're going to be okay." She tried to sound confident, but her heart was still hammering, a frantic rhythm of fear and hope. When the paramedics finally arrived, their faces etched with a practiced calm, Matilda felt a wave of relief so profound it almost buckled her knees. The world became a jumble of new smells, antiseptic and something sharp, but also something comforting, a faint sweetness. The giant, a new one, but with gentle hands, carefully lifted it from the soft warmth of the first giant's embrace. It was placed on a cold, hard surface, and a sharp sting in its neck made it flinch. But the pain quickly subsided, replaced by a strange, sleepy warmth spreading through its limbs. The new giant's voice was soft, a murmuring sound, and its touch was careful, examining. It was confusing, this new reality. The cold, the pain, the hunger, they were still there, but now interspersed with moments of strange, gentle handling. A new smell filled its nose, something metallic and clean. Then a tiny drop of moisture touched its tongue. Water. Clean, cool water. It lapped instinctively, the small sips agonizingly slow, but each drop a tiny miracle, a step away from the parched desert that had been its throat. The new giants moved efficiently, their voices low and calm. The cold, hard surface was soon replaced by something soft and warm, a gentle hum filling the air around it. Its little body, once racked with tremors, began to relax. The strange warmth from the sting in its neck deepened, spreading through its tiny limbs, lulling it into a sleep it hadn't known in what felt like an eternity. The thirst was still a memory, but now it was a fading one. The ache in its body, too, was softening, retreating into the background. Sleep pulled it down, a comforting blanket, and for the first time in days, Daisy the bobcat cub felt a flicker of something new, something that wasn't fear or pain, a fragile, tentative trust. Sirens pierced the night, a beacon of hope against the darkness of cruelty. The wail, a rising and falling lament, was a symphony of relief to Matilda, a shiver running through her 60-year-old frame that had nothing to do with the cold. For the unseen captors, it was a signal of terror, a promise of swift, unyielding consequence. Daisy the bobcat, hidden deep within the rough, woven confines of the carrier, felt the vibration of the approaching sounds. Her ears, tufted and sharp, swiveled, trying to decipher the alien noise that tore through the usual stench of fear and neglect. It was different from the shouts of the men, different from the whine of the rusty truck engine. It was a pressure, a thrumming in her chest that was both alarming and, in some deeper, wilder part of her, strangely compelling. Suddenly, the world outside the carrier exploded with new sounds. Shouts, authoritative and clear, replaced the furtive whispers. Footsteps, heavy and numerous, shook the very concrete beneath her. The air shifted, bringing new smells. Antiseptic, human sweat mixed with a faint, metallic tang. Her body, stiff and aching, coiled tighter. She remembered the last time humans had moved with such purpose, the pain, the prodding, the agonizing restraint. This felt bigger, more overwhelming. She could hear the frantic scrabbling of other creatures, the low growls and panicked whines of animals she had only vaguely sensed in the oppressive darkness. Then came the giants. Their silhouettes, cast long by the sharp beams of their handheld lights, loomed. They moved with a practiced efficiency that was a stark contrast to the rough, haphazard movements of her captors. Doors crashed open, revealing the brilliant, blinding blue and red pulsing lights from outside. The air grew colder, fresher, stirring the stale dust within the warehouse. Vets, identifiable by their crisp uniforms and the gentle yet firm way they approached the cages, immediately began assessing the animals. The humans spoke in hushed, urgent tones, their voices a low murmur that, unlike the previous shouts, didn't make her flinch. Matilda, still clutching Daisy's cub close to her chest, felt the coordinated chaos unfold around her. She watched as the warehouse slowly transformed from a den of despair into a hub of professional coordinated rescue. The cub, tiny and vulnerable, let out a weak mewl. A gentle hand, belonging to one of the giant humans, reached into Matilda's arms. Daisy watched through the mesh, a primal surge of panic and protectiveness lancing through her. But the movement was slow, deliberate. The cub was lifted, not roughly, but with an almost reverent care. Her cub. The scent was unmistakable. The small, fragile body was being held by one of these giants. Daisy's instinct screamed at her to defend, to snatch back what was hers, but her body was weak, her limbs stiff. She could only press herself against the back of her carrier, a low growl rumbling in her throat, unheard amidst the larger cacophony. She saw her cub placed on a soft, white surface, a tube leading to a strange, soft mask placed over its tiny face. A sudden rush of warmth enveloped the cub, a bright, intense light shining down. It was a fragile fight for life beginning, a battle fought by these new, strange giants. A new giant approached Daisy's carrier. This one knelt, bringing herself down to Daisy's level. Her voice was soft, a low cooing sound that, while unfamiliar, lacked the harshness Daisy had come to associate with human speech. A bowl appeared, filled with clear, shimmering water. No water. Her tongue, parched and rough, instinctively sought moisture. The giant moved slowly, offering it through the mesh. The scent of clean water was intoxicating after days of thirst. She hesitated, her body trembling, her eyes darting between the water and the giant's face. Could she trust this? The instinct to survive warred with the deep-seated fear. Slowly, carefully, she extended her snout, her tongue lapping at the cool liquid. The taste was pure, unadulterated relief, a sensation that spread through her dehydrated body, easing the burning in her throat. Each gulp was a tiny victory, a testament to the slow, steady easing of her suffering. The giant didn't move, didn't make any sudden gestures, just watched with calm, steady eyes. The initial terror began to recede, replaced by a cautious curiosity. These giants were different. Later, she was moved. The carrier opened, and instead of a rough shove, a gentle hand guided her out onto a soft surface. A new giant, smelling of antiseptic and something sweet, began to touch her. Not roughly, not painfully, but with a strange, probing gentleness. Fingers moved along her fur, checking her limbs, listening to her chest with a cold, round object. It was uncomfortable, an invasion of her personal space, but it didn't hurt. A prick, a sharp sting on her leg, and then a warm sensation spreading through her veins. Her muscles, tense for so long, began to relax just a fraction. The sounds around her softened, becoming a low hum of activity. The frantic energy of the initial arrival gave way to a focused, quieter effort. She was in a new place, a smaller, cleaner enclosure. The scent of other animals was faint, distant. The giant humans moved with a quiet purpose, their voices soft, almost soothing. She curled up, feeling the strange warmth spreading through her body from the prick. Her eyes, heavy with exhaustion, finally closed. The fear was still there, a distant echo, but now for the first time in what felt like an eternity, there was also a tiny spark of something else. A fragile, nascent trust, a hint of peace. The harshness of the past was slowly, gently giving way to the promise of care. Tiny breaths on tentative steps. The fight for life was far from over, but hope had taken root. The world for Daisy the Bobcat was a blur of strange smells and even stranger sounds, a stark contrast to the familiar scent of pine and the rustle of leaves she'd known her whole life. The journey in the rattling metal box had been terrifying. Her muscles tensed, every instinct screaming to flee. She'd snarled, a rasping sound that felt weak even to her own ears, at the giant shadows that loomed over her, their voices a low, rumbling threat. Then came the sting, a sudden sharp pain in her flank, followed by a blissful, heavy drowsiness that pulled her down into a dreamless void. When Daisy awoke, the world was still confusing, but different. The painful throb in her shoulder was duller, a persistent ache rather than a searing fire. She lay on something soft and warm, not the cold, hard earth. The air smelled of antiseptic and something else, a faint, sweet scent she couldn't quite place. She was in a cage, larger than the box, but still a cage. Her cub, the tiny, helpless bundle she'd risked everything for, was nowhere to be seen. Panic, cold and sharp, lanced through her. She pushed herself up, a wobbly attempt, and let out a low growl, a desperate call. That's when she saw them again, the giants. One, the soft-voiced female, the one who smelled of old paper and something comforting, was always there. Matilda. Days bled into weeks at the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. For Hope, the tiny bobcat cub, life began in a blur of gentle hands and strange warm liquid. The initial fear was a primal scream locked in her tiny chest. Every touch was an intrusion, every sound a potential predator. But the giant hands were surprisingly gentle. They held her close, a warmth she hadn't realized she craved until it was offered. The prick of the needle was a brief terror, quickly followed by a strange, invigorating warmth spreading through her small body. Then came the syringe, a long, thin object that brought a sweet, milky taste, filling the gnawing emptiness in her stomach. She learned to associate the sight of the giants, it initially terrifying, with the cessation of hunger and the comfort of soft blankets. Matilda became a constant, quiet presence. She would sit by the cages, her voice a low murmur, reading from a book about birds or recounting stories of her own cats. Daisy, wary and ever watchful, would track her movements with keen eyes. At first, Matilda's presence meant nothing more than another giant, but gradually, imperceptibly, the gentle cadence of her voice became less a threat and more a background hum of comfort. Daisy noticed how the other animals, the chattering squirrels with bandaged limbs, the owls with cloudy eyes, would calm in Matilda's presence. A silent acknowledgement of the woman's heroic act perhaps formed between them. It was a fragile, unarticulated bond, born not of affection, but of a grudging, instinctual understanding that this giant meant no harm. Hope's recovery was a slow, arduous journey, each milestone a triumph. Her first wobbly steps outside the incubator were clumsy and comical, her tiny legs splaying out before she found her balance. The soft blankets of her makeshift den were replaced by a larger, enclosed space with wood chips and climbing branches. She learned to chase a dangling toy, a playful swat of her paw, a new exhilarating sensation. The taste of clean water from a bowl, cool and refreshing, was a luxury after the dry days of thirst she dimly remembered. The sting of hunger that had once been a constant companion gradually receded, replaced by regular, nourishing meals. She was still small, still vulnerable, but the strength was building, bone by tiny bone. Matilda was always there, a steadfast, unmoving presence. She didn't force interaction, but her quiet care was a constant. Hope, still cautious, began to recognize the giant's scent, the gentle rise and fall of her voice. One afternoon, as Matilda cleaned her enclosure, Hope, driven by an instinctive curiosity, stalked a dangling piece of string held by the giant. Her first playful swat, a tiny, tentative tap against Matilda's hand, was not an act of aggression, but a flicker of developing trust, a spark of the wild spirit returning. It was a moment of profound connection, a silent promise that the harshness of the past was being replaced by the gentle, consistent care of the present. For Matilda, and for all who witnessed Hope's slow but steady ascent from trauma, it became a symbol of resilience, a testament to the powerful, healing force of unwavering compassion. The quietest reunion spoke volumes of love, loss, and the promise of a new beginning. Days bled into weeks, each one a step closer to the inevitable, beautiful culmination. Daisy, the bobcat, had transformed. The gaunt, wild creature that had hissed and clawed her way into Matilda's life was now sleek, her dappled fur gleaming, her movements fluid and confident. Her distrust hadn't vanished entirely. A healthy wildness still flickered in her golden eyes, but it was tempered by a burgeoning understanding, a fragile thread of acceptance woven through the careful hands that fed her, the soft voices that soothed her. She remembered the gnawing emptiness, the ache in her belly, the frantic, desperate search for the little one ripped from her. The humans, at first looming shadows, had become the source of warmth, of sustenance. Their touch, once sharp with the prick of needles, now brought the soothing rub of soft cloths and the gentle pressure of a hand offering food. The day came, heralded by a subtle shift in the air, a different kind of tension that even Daisy, with her sharpened senses, could perceive. There was a buzz of activity, hushed voices, and the distinct scent of a new presence. One that stirred something deep within her, a memory of soft fur and tiny paws, and warmth that had been missing for too long. They led her gently into a larger, sun-drenched space, a holding pen with soft bedding and fresh water. She paced, her tail twitching, a low rumble beginning in her chest. Then she saw her, tucked into a corner, small and hesitant, was Hope. Hope, the little one. Daisy's heart, a wild rhythmic drum, seemed to skip a beat. The initial encounter was tentative, fraught with the instincts of a wild mother protecting her young, even from herself. Daisy approached her cub with a caution that belied the urgency in her soul. She circled, low to the ground, her nose twitching, taking in the scent of her own, the familiar sweetness overlaid with the antiseptic smell of the humans and the new, clean scent of the sanctuary. Hope, the tiny bobcat, initially cowered, her ears flattened, her eyes wide with a residual fear. She remembered the terrifying separation, the giant hands that had scooped her up, the bewildering new smells and sounds. Now a larger presence, yet familiar, approached. Daisy sniffed her carefully, her nostrils flaring, trying to confirm what her heart already knew. Hope, sensing the lack of aggression, slowly uncurled, her small nose reaching out tentatively. A soft purr, a sound Daisy hadn't made in what felt like an eternity, rumbled deep in her chest. A low, guttural vibration that resonated with pure, unadulterated relief. It was a gentle lick, a rough, comforting swipe of her tongue across Hope's small head. And Hope, with an almost audible sigh of contentment, nuzzled into her mother's side, a tiny, instinctual motion that spoke volumes. The scent of her mother, the rough texture of her fur, the warmth of her body, it was home. It was a silent, profound moment, a testament to the unbreakable bond between them, a bond that had been stretched, strained, but never truly severed. Matilda watched from a discreet distance, tears streaming down her face, witnessing the raw, beautiful power of maternal love. The harsh clinic lights, the sterile smells, The terrifying capture, all of it had led to this. This was the moment of their true healing, the beginning of their new shared life. Matilda felt a swell of profound gratitude for the resilience of these wild hearts and for the quiet dignity of their reunion. Hope, safe by her mother's side, felt the deep comfort of belonging again, the scattered pieces of her young world snapping back into place. The darkness, that suffocating, oppressive blanket that had shrouded so many days, had been torn. A raw, exposed wound it was, but one that miraculously began to heal, leaving behind a ripple effect of change and, for Matilda, a new, unforeseen purpose. Daisy the bobcat felt at first as a cessation of the jarring movements, the clanking, the constant low rumble that vibrated through her very bones. Then came the sense, a bewildering mix of unfamiliar, sharp smells that pricked at her sensitive nose, overriding the stale stench of her recent confinement. She was still in the too small box, her muscles cramped and aching, her fur matted and coarse against her skin. A strange, insistent ringing pulsed in her ears, a memory of the loud noises that had accompanied her transfer. Her instincts screamed danger, a primal warning that had kept her alive in the shadows. Then came the giants. They loomed, their shadows long and distorted, their voices a low murmur that vibrated through the air, unfamiliar and unsettling. One giant, smaller than the others, moved with a slowness that Daisy recognized, a quiet respect that didn't immediately trigger her fight or flight response. This giant had the scent of the soft blanket, the gentle touch that had previously brought brief moments of unexpected comfort. This was Matilda. The box was open fully, revealing a different kind of confinement. A large open space, yet still enclosed by walls, smelled faintly of disinfectant and other animals. Daisy remained frozen, her body coiled, ready to spring, every nerve alive. A gentle pressure, a familiar warmth against her flank. Matilda. She felt a hesitant, feathery touch, a long, slow stroke down her back. It wasn't the rough handling of the past, it was soft. The sting of a needle came then, a brief, sharp pinch on her haunch, followed by a wave of drowsiness that pulled at her heavy eyelids, blurring the giants into indistinct forms. She slumped, a strange warmth spreading through her limbs, washing away some of the gnawing ache. A soft blanket, smelling faintly of clean earth and sun, was placed over her, enveloping her in a cocoon of unexpected peace. When Daisy awoke, the room was different, softer. The light was warmer, streaming in from a high window, dappling the floor with shifting patterns. Her body felt lighter, less stiff. The air held a new scent, a mix of fresh hay, clean water, and the faint, comforting aroma of another bobcat, a ghost of a presence that offered a sliver of reassurance. A bowl of cool, clean water sat nearby, reflecting the light. She lapped at it, the liquid a soothing balm to her dry throat, so much more satisfying than the stale, murky water of before. Then meat, fresh, red, delicious. She devoured it, her hunger a desperate, insistent growl in her chest. Matilda's initial discovery, a desperate whisper from Daisy the bobcat, had blossomed into a full-throated roar. The evidence Matilda had meticulously gathered, the chilling documentation of the trafficking ring's cruelty, proved crucial. It wasn't just a hunch, it was irrefutable proof, concrete and damning. The leaders of the animal trafficking ring, men who had treated living beings as commodities, were arrested, their illicit enterprise dismantled, their cruel reign ended. Matilda's story, a testament to her quiet courage and unwavering empathy, went viral. It was accompanied by heart-wrenching images of the rescued animals, a terrified fox with matted fur, a listless owl with dulled eyes, and yes, Daisy, her face a mask of fear, her small body trembling. These images, raw and unfiltered, sparked a wave of public outrage, an indignant cry for justice that rippled across social media and into living rooms. Support for animal welfare organizations surged, donations pouring in, volunteers offering their time and skills. Matilda, once a quiet recluse, A woman who found solace in the hushed companionship of her rescued cat found herself thrust into the unfamiliar role of an advocate. Her voice, once soft and hesitant, gained strength and conviction. She spoke passionately, her words amplifying the silent plight of voiceless creatures, inspiring countless others to take action. She helped establish a local sanctuary, a haven of hope where the injured could heal, the neglected could thrive, and the traumatized could slowly, painstakingly learn to trust again. Daisy, in her new enclosure, felt the sun on her fur, smelled the rich, damp earth after a light rain, and heard the rustle of leaves, not the clanking of metal. The giants still moved around her, but now their movements were predictable, their presence a source of food and water, not fear. One giant, Matilda, often sat near her enclosure, speaking in a low, soothing murmur, never demanding, always patient. Daisy watched her, her golden amber eyes tracking the familiar, comforting figure. The ghost of fear still lingered, a phantom ache in her memory, but it was receding, replaced by a nascent feeling, a new tentative openness. The legal repercussions for the traffickers were swift and severe, a satisfying, tangible outcome of Matilda's courage. But the true, profound impact of her actions extended far beyond just the immediate rescue of a handful of animals. It was in the unexpected emergence of Matilda herself, a quiet hero transformed into a fierce advocate for animal rights. She was a testament to the power of one person's empathy, a beacon of hope illuminating the path toward a more compassionate world. The sanctuary she helped create wasn't just a place of healing for animals, it was a monument to the unexpected strength found in quiet corners, a testament to the enduring power of justice and the slow, beautiful blooming of trust. The wild called, a primal, undeniable pull that had been muted by pain and fear, but now a connection, forged in desperation, remained eternal. Daisy, the bobcat, felt it deep in her sinews, a burgeoning strength that hummed with the promise of freedom. Her once ragged fur, now sleek and vibrant, twitched with anticipation. The scent of pine and damp earth, stronger than ever, filtered into her enclosure, stirring instincts that had been dormant for too long. Hope, the younger bobcat, her adopted sibling, mirrored her restlessness, batting at imaginary prey, her emerald eyes bright with youthful energy. The giants, Matilda and her steady companions, moved with a different rhythm now. Their touch was less frequent, their presence a gentle hum rather than a constant focus. It was a subtle shift, a gradual loosening of the bonds that had cradled Daisy and Hope through their darkest hours. Daisy remembered the terror of capture, the sharp sting of the needle, the suffocating darkness of the crate. She remembered the throbbing ache in her paw, the gnawing hunger, the overwhelming confusion. Then came the warmth, the soft bedding, the strange taste of water from a bowl, and the relentless, quiet presence of the giants. Matilda's scent, initially a source of apprehension, had become synonymous with safety, with the miraculous cessation of pain. The careful application of salves, the steady hand holding a bowl of fresh meat, these were the lessons of trust, slowly, painstakingly learned. One morning, the familiar gate to their spacious outdoor enclosure swung open, not to be cleaned, but to reveal a pathway leading into the dense woods beyond. Daisy froze, her ears swiveling. This was different. This was the wild. Hope, less burdened by memory, bounded forward, sniffing at the strange new ground. Daisy hesitated, a flicker of apprehension. Was this a trick? Was this another shift? Another unknown? She glanced back at the retreating figures of the giants, their faces unreadable. But then the wind carried the scent of rabbit, strong and intoxicating, and an ancient hunger, a primordial urge, took hold. With a surge of exhilaration, Daisy sprang forward, Hope at her heels, melting into the shadows of the forest. The first few weeks were a dizzying symphony of senses. The world was bigger, sharper, more vibrant than anything they had known in their enclosures. The whisper of leaves, the rustle of unseen creatures, the myriad scents that painted a complex tapestry of life and death. It was overwhelming and exhilarating. Daisy taught Hope how to stalk, how to listen, how to read the subtle signs of the forest. They hunted, they drank from clear streams, they slept under the vast, star-strewn sky. The memory of pain and fear gradually receded, replaced by the primal rhythm of survival and the pure joy of movement. Yet even in the intoxicating freedom, a faint, almost imperceptible pull remained. Sometimes as dusk settled, Daisy found herself drawn to the edge of the human territory, to the scent of Matilda's porch where the aroma of coffee mingled with the earthy smell of the old woman's garden. She never approached too closely, never revealed herself. It was enough to be near, a silent acknowledgement of a bond that transcended the wild. Matilda, too, felt the lingering connection. She often sat on her porch swing, a steaming mug in her hands, her gaze sweeping the tree line, not just for coffee, but for a glimpse, a silent reassurance that her wild charges were thriving. The occasional rustle in the undergrowth, a fleeting shadow, was enough. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues, Daisy felt an irresistible urge. The scent of Matilda was strong, closer than usual. Hope was curled in a hollow log, oblivious. Daisy padded silently through the fading light, her movements fluid and soundless. She reached the edge of the clearing, hidden by a tangle of thorny bushes. Matilda was there, on her porch swing, a blanket draped over her knees. Her eyes were fixed on the woods, a familiar, yearning expression on her face. Daisy watched her for a long moment, a strange warmth unfurling in her chest. It wasn't hunger or fear or even curiosity. It was something deeper, a recognition of shared history, of kindness given and trust returned. Then a small movement. Daisy stepped out from the shadows, her tawny fur a vibrant streak against the darkening foliage. She paused, her gaze locking with Matilda's. There was no fear in her eyes, only a quiet acknowledgement, a deep, silent communion. Matilda gasped, a hand flying to her mouth. A single tear tracked down her weathered cheek. It was a moment suspended in time, a bridge built between two worlds. Then, as quickly as she had appeared, Daisy melted back into the shadows, a fleeting phantom of the wild. Matilda smiled, a profound, heartfelt smile that reached her eyes. She knew their story. The Bobcat's plea had not only saved lives, but had ignited a movement, a lasting legacy of hope and compassion. She knew with a certainty that warmed her to her core that Daisy and Hope were truly free, and truly healed. If this video touched your heart, I'd love to hear from you. Just drop a simple comment. Maybe type 1 if you'd welcome more story like this, or 0 if you just want to say you were here, or sharing your thoughts about the video. We'll see you on the next video.